He found a mother Bigfoot weeping over her dying baby, her cries echoing through the cold, silent woods. The heartbreaking sound carried a pain so human it stopped him in his tracks. She refused to leave her little one's side, rocking it gently, trying to breathe life back into its tiny chest. What happened next will leave you speechless, a powerful moment of love, loss, and connection that proves some emotions reach far beyond the boundaries of humanity. William Jansen, a quiet man in his late 50s, worked as a forest caretaker in the misty wilds of the Pacific Northwest. Solitude was his constant companion, the kind that only ancient trees and distant winds could offer. One cold evening, as the fog thickened and night crept in, William trudged through the woods, checking the boundary markers near the northern ridge. His breath formed white clouds in the cold air. Suddenly, a sound stopped him, a deep, mournful moan rolling through the trees. It wasn't the cry of a bear, nor the wail of a cougar. It was something else, something heartbreakingly human in tone, layered with sorrow and fear. His instincts told him to turn back, but curiosity, or perhaps compassion, pulled him forward. He followed the echo through dripping moss, over fallen logs, and into a shadowed clearing bathed in pale moonlight. There, his flashlight beam froze on a sight that made his heart pound. A massive female Bigfoot crouched on the forest floor, her thick fur matted with moisture. In her arms lay a smaller form, a baby Bigfoot, limp and silent. The mother rocked it gently, her huge shoulders trembling, low guttural sounds slipping from her throat. William stood still, barely daring to breathe. The scene before him was not one of danger but of grief, a mother's silent plea to the night. The baby's chest rose once, faintly, then stilled again. William lowered his light, feeling the weight of her sorrow settle over him. The forest, usually alive, with sound, had gone completely still, as if nature itself was holding its breath for the mother and her lost child. In that lonely clearing, humanity and the unknown shared the same heartbreak. William stayed hidden behind a thick cedar tree, barely breathing. His flashlight was off now. The faint moonlight was enough. He didn't want to startle her, didn't want to interrupt something that felt sacred, even if it was painful to witness. The massive female Bigfoot remained crouched in the clearing, her body trembling as she brushed damp leaves and bits of moss off her baby's small, still face. Every few seconds, she lifted its limp arm as if checking for life, then let out a low, heart-wrenching moan that made the hair on William's neck stand up. It wasn't just noise, it was grief. Deep, raw, unmistakable grief. Her thick fur was soaked through with rain and streaked with mud, but she seemed unaware of it. Every ounce of her focus was on the little one in her arms. She rocked it gently, her broad hands surprisingly tender, humming softly in a tone that was both eerie and beautiful, a lullaby filled with desperation. William felt his chest tighten. All his life, he had heard tales of Bigfoot wild stories meant to frighten or entertain, but this moment shattered all of that. This creature wasn't a monster. She was a mother in pain, clinging to hope, where there was almost none left. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind had gone still, as though nature itself respected her sorrow. Then, a faint motion, the baby's chest rose weakly, a shallow, fragile breath. William's heart leaped. But the moment passed as quickly as it came. The tiny chest went still again. The mother leaned forward, pressing her face close to her baby's. She made a deep, rhythmic sound, a rumbling exhale, almost like she was trying to breathe life back into the child. Her rocking grew slower, her tone lower, fading into broken sobs that echoed through the woods. William's eyes stung. He knew he was witnessing something extraordinary, something no human had ever truly seen. Not a myth, not a beast, just a mother, heartbroken in the quiet arms of the forest, mourning her child beneath the endless Pacific sky. Torn between fear and compassion, William slowly backed away from the clearing, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to pretend he had seen nothing. But his heart wouldn't let him. That mother's grief had pierced him to the core. At his truck, he rummaged through the back seat with trembling hands. He found an old wool blanket, a lantern, and a half-full flask of water. It wasn't much, but it was all he could offer. With a deep breath, he turned back toward the forest, every step echoing with doubt and hope. When he reached the clearing again, the fog hung heavier, and the silence felt sacred. The mother was still there, hunched over her baby, her broad shoulders shaking softly. As William approached, a low growl rolled from her chest, deep, controlled, and warning. It wasn't meant to scare, only to protect. William stopped several feet away, his heart hammering. He raised his hands slowly, palms open. "It's all right," he whispered gently. "I won't hurt you." His voice wavered in the cool night air, more plea than reassurance. Carefully, he crouched down and set the blanket and water flask on the ground before stepping back a few paces. The Bigfoot's dark eyes followed his every move, alert but not aggressive, more tired than threatening. Minutes passed in stillness. The only sound was the soft drip of water from the trees above. Then, a small shift to the baby's chest, which had been faintly rising before, went still. Entirely still. The mother froze, her breathing stopping for a moment. Then came a sound that William would never forget, a deep, guttural cry that tore through the forest, echoing off the distant ridges. It was pure heartbreak, raw and ancient. William's eyes blurred with tears as he watched her lift the small, lifeless body to her chest. She rocked it once more, her cry, rising into the dark canopy until even the owls fell silent. He stood there helpless, his heart breaking with hers. In that lonely, mist-covered clearing, he realized compassion wasn't just human. It lived in every mother, every creature, every soul that could love and lose. The mother Bigfoot remained still for a long time, cradling her baby against her chest. The forest around them seemed to understand. It fell into a deep, reverent silence. Not a bird sang, not a leaf stirred. Even the wind held its breath. William stood motionless, hidden among the trees, his heart heavy. The sight before him felt like something sacred, something not meant for human eyes. The mother swayed gently, humming low and soft, as if singing her child to sleep one last time. Then, with slow, trembling movements, she lowered the tiny body to the forest floor. Her great hands, rough yet careful, arranged the baby's arms neatly across its chest. She paused, gazing down for several long seconds, then began to gather leaves, twigs, and soft ferns from the ground around her. One by one, she laid them over the small form, her motions deliberate and tender. William's throat tightened as realization struck him she was burying her baby. The air was thick with sorrow, the kind that seemed to reach into the earth itself. The mother worked patiently, as though performing a ritual she somehow understood by instinct. When the mound was complete, covered in a gentle blanket of green and brown, she placed her hand over it and bowed her head. Then she looked up. Her dark, glistening eyes met William's from across the clearing. For a moment, neither moved. There was no fear, no threat, only a shared, quiet understanding between two beings who had both known loss. The mother blinked slowly, then gave a low, resonant hum, a final lullaby, a goodbye. Her massive form rose, shoulders slumped but dignified, and she turned toward the trees. Step by step, she disappeared into the misty shadows, her silhouette fading like a dream at dawn. William remained rooted to the spot, his breath shallow, his vision blurred with tears. He couldn't move, not yet. The sound of her soft, retreating footsteps lingered in his mind, echoing through the still forest. That night, under the weight of silence, William knew he had witnessed something sacred, a mother's farewell, whispered into the heart of the wild. Early the next morning, the forest was wrapped in a pale, silvery mist when William made his way back to the clearing. The air was still cold, his breath forming soft clouds as he followed the narrow path he had taken the night before. Every step felt heavier, burdened by the memory of what he had seen. When he reached the clearing, the first rays of dawn filtered weakly through the trees, painting the moss in shades of gold and green. The small mound was just as he had left it, untouched, peaceful, resting quietly beneath a thin veil of dew. But something new caught his eye. Beside the mound lay a small bundle of wildflowers, freshly gathered, and a few forest berries arranged carefully together. William's breath caught in his throat. She had come back. The mother had returned during the night to pay her final respects to her child. A hush seemed to fall even deeper over the place. The forest no longer felt empty. It felt sacred, alive with an invisible weight of love and loss. William removed his hat and knelt beside the mound. For a long moment, he simply stared at it, feeling a quiet ache in his chest. "Rest easy, little one," he whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. He didn't touch a thing. He knew this was not his to disturb. This ground now belonged to something beyond him. As he turned to leave, something else caught his eye. Faint impressions in the soft mud leading away from the clearing. One set was large, deep, and heavy. The other was smaller, lighter, as though the little one had somehow walked beside her. William stared at them, uncertain what to believe. Had she taken her baby somewhere else? Or had her spirit simply refused to let go? He didn't know. But as he walked back through the quiet forest, one thing was certain: the man who entered those woods last night was not the same one who left them this morning. Something inside William Jansen had changed forever. In the days that followed, William Jansen couldn't shake the memory of what he had witnessed. The image of the grieving mother and her lifeless child stayed with him not as a haunting, but as something deeply sacred. Every time he closed his eyes, he could still hear that low, sorrowful hum echoing through the trees. He began writing it all down in his field journal, every sound, every flicker of movement, every emotion that had stirred within him. He wanted to preserve the truth of that night, not as a legend, but as a record of something real and deeply human. For years, he told no one. He knew how it would sound: a caretaker claiming to have watched a Bigfoot bury her child. They'd laugh, or worse, dismiss it entirely. So, he kept the secret close, locked between him and the forest. Yet, William often found himself drawn back to that clearing. Each time, he brought a small handful of berries, his quiet offering, and left them atop the little mound. He never stayed long, just enough to pay his respects. Then one morning, something changed. The berries were gone, and in their place lay a few wildflowers, carefully arranged, the same kind he had found there once before. A shiver went through him, not of fear but of understanding. She remembered. As the years turned him grey and his steps grew slower, William carried the story in his heart. Finally, in his old age, He shared it with a close friend over coffee, his voice soft but steady. "That wasn't a wild animal out there," he said. "It was a mother. She loved, she mourned, and she let go just like any of us would." In his later years, William often sat by his cabin window, gazing toward the distant tree line where it had all happened. He would reflect softly that some stories are too sacred to doubt. "Out there in those woods," he'd say, his voice trembling with memory, "a mother refused to leave her dying child, and in her sorrow, she showed us that love and loss aren't just human." When he finished telling his story, there was always silence, the kind that spoke louder than words. Those who listened never forgot it, leaving with hearts heavy, yet quietly changed forever.